All right. So nice to meet everybody. I'm gonna do a quick intro of myself, and then we can, get the workshop started. Let me share my screen in the meanwhile as well. Okay. So, before we get started, just a little bit about myself. I have about 20 plus years of experience building investment platforms, investment infrastructure. I started my career at Goldman Sachs for about, little shy of a decade, working on different aspects, both public and private investments, derivatives. But the latter half of my kind of time at Goldman was specifically focused on private investments, particularly private credit. I built deep infrastructure for origination, servicing, reporting of private credit, and then I worked from the sell side into buy side at a large private equity firm and a large asset manager, KKR. And so I built a lot of buy side trading, investment research, middle back office, all of that. Not just for private credit. It started with private credit, but expanded across all asset classes from a private markets perspective. I led teams that were responsible for LP reporting and packages for performance and GIPS reporting, investment portfolio analytics, as well as portfolio accounting systems. So I led a lot of that infrastructure development. And then I worked at a few different startups, Open Invest, Lending Club, and really dabbled into very early stage investment infrastructure, different types of investments. At Lending Club, I was the head of investment, retail, and institutional. Um, and so, my career has been a culmination of what I am working on now. Um, I've worked both closely, at large fund managers as well as an LP. I'm part of a few angel networks as well as, an LP myself. So, a lot of, you know, sort of unfinished problems. A lot of my history has sort of led me into solving a lot of the stuff that I'm solving. And my entire network is in the investment space, institutional as well as sort of angel networks and family offices. So that has led me, into sort of my understanding of AI at this moment, where AI is being applied into every industry, particularly private markets. I think there's been a lot of excitement around because this industry, has been traditionally very manual, paper-based. And so that's sort of going to be the main topic of the hour. And, yeah, so it's great to see everyone. I'm gonna get started. If people have questions, I'll leave some time at the end for questions. So, in terms of why we started with Beyond ChatGPT, I've been attending a lot of institutional investment, conferences, particularly focused on private markets and private investments. And from 2, 3 years ago to this year in 2026, I definitely see a huge change in terms of 3 years ago or 2 years ago, there was a lot of skepticism. AI being used for investments, and oh, we don't want, AI making any decisions. What if the information's incorrect? Is it, accurate? So I think there was a lot of skepticism. People were, not really open to now what I'm hearing is, oh yeah, we're definitely using AI. And then, when we start digging more into how are you using it, there's a lot of, yeah, we just installed, ChatGPT, or we just installed Claude or Anthropic across our enterprise and everybody's using it. And then when I dig even further, a lot of the use cases are about okay, we are pasting or uploading documents into these AI tools, and getting insights pretty quickly, which is great. Some of the analysts or some of the people are like, wow. And I myself started doing it too when I received pitch decks. It's great to sort of put it into these tools, get some of the information. But I'm focused more on where you're investing in funds, and where you're receiving like 30 or 40 page PPMs and DDQs. And so these tools are helpful where you upload into a chat GPT, and maybe have your list of questions that you paste, and you get those answered. And I've had, small kind of family offices build this type of automation where they have their checklist of questions, upload some of the documents, you get all your questions answered, then you copy that output into a spreadsheet. You still have your notes and email threads, or maybe you start using Granola or some other note-taking tools. But there's still a lot of tool sprawl. There's still, if you have 40, 50 investments,
into the direction that we saw when there were attacks on
I'm
commercial
hearing
banks.
some background noise. Can everybody please mute yourself? All right, thank you. Yeah, so there's, still people still spending time on data extraction, manually reading documents, data entry into your CRMs or pipeline tools or spreadsheets or whatever other tools you're using to create the packages and presentation materials. And that takes away time from research, from building your intuition, from connecting with the investment team or the founders, and really making a better assessment on your investment. So yes, that's sort of where people are doing. Of course, you may be from an advanced institution, or you may have built some more automation, which is great. um, but and that's the direction you should be going, which is using the agentic infrastructure, right? Where you have a lot of the mundane repeatable tasks done by AI agents, like reading every document for you, as opposed to you uploading it into an AI tool and then asking questions about it. No manual data entry. Investments would automatically appear in your pipeline. Structured data stays updated, right? Your due diligence checklist, automatically gets checked and reviewed against every investment. And doing all of that in a cohesive fashion, in a singular platform, right? So that's sort of what I started sort of building the vision around, that this is what the future of applying AI into investment workflows. Not necessarily just using the tools, various AI tools available, but actually, you know, redefining how you do your investment research and how you get to the decisions, and what are all the repeatable manual tasks that can be automated with agents. So that's what I'm going to go through sort of next, right? And as I said, I started talking with a lot of, investment folks from various, realms, like institutional LPs, single family offices, multifamily offices, individual, high net worth investors. They're generally, I would say, in three stages. The first stage, as I mentioned, everybody is at this point, unless you're living under a rock, has started using AI tools, right? And it mostly AI as an assistant. You are using either ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, or some sort of assistive tools, like Granola or others, to generate your meeting summaries, or generate summaries of documents that you received from the investment team. And it's not necessarily embedded in your workflow, but you are using AI tools in some shape or form. And that's what I call as AI as an assistant. That's the stage where majority of the investors are in. There are some who have started embedding AI into their workflows, and maybe they have been using a CRM that has recently enabled AI into their tool, and they have auto data extraction from documents. And so in some shape or form, you're doing a consistent, repeatable process across all your investments, whether they're funds or they're individual investments. You're basically consistently extracting information in a cohesive way so you can actually, do more automation on top of it. Like, AI is doing some sort of a first pass, checking against your checklist or checking against your, hey, we never don't invest in these regions, or we don't invest in anything, that has X, Y, and Z, or whatever criteria that you have. So that's usually like in the second stage where you've actually found a consistent way of applying AI across all the investments that you're receiving. But I think the final stage, which is where the future is going, is where you have multiple agents running whether you're working or not working, right? So there's a platform or something which has several agents doing all the manual work that you were doing before on your behalf, so that when you are working or when you log in, you have all the insights, all the information, everything ready for you to view, review, and make the decision, right? Really gives you that speed in terms of decision making. A lot of investors, and the problems that I heard is, okay, there are tools, we've gotten better, we've reduced time in terms of reading 50-page kind of documents, which is great, but we still have where information is still spread out. It's not fully searchable. A lot of that insight is sitting within those chat tools. Um, and so that's sort of where you have a singular kind of space where you have multiple agents doing the same task across all types of investments, um, and presenting data in a very consistent way, right? So now your insights become knowledge, and it's persisted somewhere such that it's searchable, such that you can actually start building data such that you can look back at history on, did you make, and how did you make this investment, or why did you reject this investment? And it can compare with the future, investment, saying you've passed this, or you rejected this in the past, something similar, and so should you be looking at it? This, helps you get to a no quickly, especially when you are one of those investors where you are inundated with a lot of incoming investment pitch decks. Um, you are not going to have time to review every single pitch deck. You're not going to have time to respond to every single person who's pitching to you. But what you want to get to is a no quickly, right? So if you have received 30 pitch decks this week, it's fine if you are not able to identify the top three out of the 30 this week, but can you eliminate 15 out of the 30 that you don't even need to look at, right? If there's something that's going to do that reliably, consistently, you can configure that. That's a huge win. So now you've gone from 30 to 15, maybe with some more agents running in the background, you go from 15 to 5. And 5 is manageable to look at in a week and say, okay, I'm going to now do a little bit of more, deep digging into those 5, and then, identify like, okay, what are the top 2 or 3 that I want to invest in? So that's the future, right? Like that's the idea where we all want to get to. We don't want to spend hours and hours looking through these documents. Um, so with that, like, a big part of this workshop is walking through my journey and culmination of that into the platform that I've built, which is InvestHub. It is a full agentic suite of multiple agents sort of running, pulling information on your behalf, preparing information in the way you want to prepare, um, and constantly giving you one place, one home where you can go in at any time and look at most up-to-date, accurate information about any investment, right? So it's a suite of agents. There's data room intelligence agent, IC memo creation, board package creation agents, agents that score investments in your pipeline and compare them side by side within minutes. An agent that is constantly, a due diligence checklist or a criteria that you can create yourself And then the agent's constantly checking incoming investments according to that criteria or checklist. Um, there's also a portfolio tracking agent, as well as, recent news, any trends, market kind of intelligence type of agent. So all of these working in the background on the same platform, same consistent information, so that you can go at any given point, look up any investment and know what's going on, right? And get to a decision quickly. We're going to go through some of these, um, in a little bit more depth. So, the data room intelligence agent basically, and a lot of examples I'm going to use is because we've been working with institutional LPs and multifamily offices, with InvestHub and implementing it for them. And so a lot of their investments are on fund managers. They do some direct investments and co-investments as well, but a lot of them invest in funds, private funds. And so my examples are all that, but the platform has been built to support all types of investments and investors. Um, so for this data room intelligence agent, the main purpose is it can point to any data room, and you can configure multiple data rooms, and it will constantly look for new investments that you have gotten access to or updates to existing investments. It will ingest and classify the document. So this was a key part as we work with some, investors, that organizing all the documents into, these are all your PPMs. This is an LPA. This is a pitch book. This is, a market research document. These are case studies. These are financial documents or historical track record documents. So, the agent not only downloads, but it classifies all these documents. And then it extracts hundreds of insights, usually done within, 2 to 3 minutes. It's structured as well as unstructured insights. And all of these, whether it's 100, 250, it's fully configurable. So each investor can come in and define, for example, for private credit, I want to extract these 100 data points. And they can define, we work with them, and it's done, pretty much in a matter of a few hours. And then, the agent just basically pulls that. So it can be done by asset classes. Um, and, every field or insight that is extracted is linked back to the source. And you can see the extracted data and the source document side by side at any given point within the platform, right? So that completely reduces the risk of, the hallucination. Did it extract it correctly? Where did it pull this information from? And all of that kind of goes away or reduces the risk. Um, so yeah, so it's basically, from my understanding, analysts spend hours and weeks sometimes pulling all this information, putting it into, if they have a process to put it in a CRM or a pipeline tool or a spreadsheet, it takes hours to do that, sometimes days, across various documents. Sometimes you receive a folder in a data room that is, nested with 60 documents, each document being 30, 50 page. It's a nightmare. And so, this agent just takes care of the data kind of flows as you upload revisions of LPAs. It automatically keeps your information up to date in the system. So that at any given point, when you're looking at an investment, you're looking at the most current data. So it really helps you, focus on making the decision, and focusing on the analysis, building the relationship with the investment team, or or the the actual the startup founders, or whatever it is that you're investing in, as opposed to managing the data and the information. The next one is, IC memo and packaging, and a lot of people are focused on this particular aspect and automating it. So, the agent really takes away hours and hours of assembly. I'm downplaying it by saying that, senior analysts spend 6 to 10 hours pulling data to prepare, an IC memo or a review package. I know, it takes days sometimes, revisions and revisions and reviews by managers, revisions again. And yeah, it's a nightmare. And so chasing down those figures, you're doing it, on a particular day, on a Friday. By the time, maybe there's an updated DDQ, you had some questions from the investment team, they came back, now your information's stale. And you have to look it through that document again and update your IC memo again. So all of that is taken care of, right? And so when the first agent extracts all the insights and creates a structured data, the next agent's already kicked off and working on assembling and creating your IC memo. And so you can view the memo in the platform itself, or you can download it as a PDF, Word, or PowerPoint, which is also configurable. So a lot of different firms or people have IC memos. It's a very institutional thing. Some people's IC memos are just 3 pages or 4 pages. It's supposed to be brief, concise. Some organizations' IC memos is like a full package of a 20 slide package with every aspect about that investment included in it. And so the way we've designed it is you can configure how you want it, what aspects about the investment you want in the memo, and then every single investment, it consistently creates that type of memo or the package, right? So it's automatically drafted. And the idea is that you're not working in Word or PowerPoint. You're working on the platform. You're reviewing information in the platform that the agent has extracted. If you need to modify it slightly, you can use an assistant to rewrite it. But when you update the platform, your IC memo automatically gets regenerated and updated. So, that whole thing about we have the information in one place, our CRM has it, but once you start creating your IC memo or the presentation, now there's a disconnect because that's where you are operating and that's where you put the latest information. You didn't go back and update the latest information in your CRM or your pipeline tool. So there's a disconnect and there's a like, well, which one is the most recent version? Which one has the latest terms? And so the idea is you're operating from one platform and your artifacts or your outputs are automatically updated and generated. The next one is something that again we worked with a couple of LPs. They gave that feedback that the idea about getting to a no quickly, right? And so, hey, I have like again 60 investments sitting in my pipeline. Well, 50 of them are funds, some of them are direct investments, and let's say 10 of them are real estate funds. And how do I know, right? Like, should I be looking at each of the 10 real estate funds to then I may only invest in one or two of those real estate funds? How do they differ? What is different about each one of them? And you need to spend a lot of time to even get from 10 to, those one or two real estate funds that you now want to actually go deep dive and do your deeper due diligence in. So that's what we've designed this agent to do is you can define your strategy or your criteria and it scores funds or investments according to that and then you can view them all side by side. Because all the information is extracted in the system, you don't need to pull it in a spreadsheet or do any of that. You can define your criteria, give it weighting like team, timing, market, strategy, risk, all of the fees, terms, all of that. And then, it compares, all the different 10 real estate funds across all the criteria side by side. And it makes it really easy for you now to look at them and say, okay, you know, these five do not fit, we're not going to look at them. But now you've reduced it to 50% from 10 to 5, easier to identify the two or three that you want to go deep dive. And then really reduces from weeks to days of when you can identify the one or two funds that you want to invest in. So this is just an example that we actually work with, giving an example of real estate funds, somebody who's heavy investor in real estate funds. And the same can be applied for private credit funds or private equity funds, venture funds, and so on and so forth, or direct investments as well. So that's the other agent, which is constantly, as your information's updating, constantly gives you a sort of comparison and scorecard that allows you to easily eliminate the ones that are not a fit for your strategy, and then highlight the ones that actually match your strategy. Um, Another agent is the due diligence checklist agent. Again, as the first agent extracts all the insights, there's the due diligence checklist already running. And you can have due diligence created by different asset classes. So obviously, the due diligence you would do on a real estate fund would be different than you would do on a direct investment on a startup, or the due diligence you would do on a private credit fund would be different than on a venture fund. So you can define your due diligence checklists based on different asset classes. And then the agent just runs that checklist, identifies missing items or any kind of flags, um, and just quickly gives you a summary, and then you can kind of drill down and look at what's missing, where you need to reach out to the investment team, get more information, or just flag something that it just falls below your criteria and you want to eliminate that investment. So it takes care of all of that behind the scenes and just presents the summary and the details to you, right, automatically. Um, The other one is portfolio tracking. This is an early agent we've recently built in partnership with an institutional LP. Um, they're more of a pension plan, and so there's very strict governance and guidelines on, targets versus pacing. They have specific investment targets on various asset classes, and so they need constant monitoring on which asset classes are they overexposed, underexposed, where are they far from their target versus close to their target. And similar to asset class, you can do this with industry or sector as well if you have targets on certain industry and sector. And so this gives you a quick view of your different portfolios, and where it stands compared to your pacing plans and your targets. It also gives exposure analysis and exposure alerts if you're overexposed or underexposed in certain sectors. So you can define those flags and get alerted. And this is continuously updated, again, based on continuous updates that you may get from the investment, the fund manager, or the whatever that it is that you've invested in, right? So as it gets fed into the platform, this view is always current, right? And at any given point, you can see how your portfolio is performing. Um, we also have the ability to actually push in valuation data. So there's a couple of common valuation providers that our LPs work with. So take in feeds from them, and it actually provides the valuation for your portfolio as well. And you can see it all in this one snapshot. This is a newer agent, so there's a lot that we can build here, more like detail, like portfolio analytics. And so we're working with some of our early partners to build that out. Would love to hear, any feedback that any of you have as well. Um, the next one is, this is also a newer agent. It's news, trends, intelligence. So this is a lot of times applies more to if you're the one who's investing in emerging managers, or early stage, startups. Then you'd spend a lot of time researching the team, the people, researching the company, and the people's backgrounds. So this agent is meant to pull a lot of that information on your behalf and present it to you, right? So monitors any news about a particular fund manager, the company, as well as the top like investment team and each of those people. What are they posting on X? What are they posting on LinkedIn? What recent filings has that company or that fund manager done? What are the market signals in the space in which they're operating? If it's, again, it's a real estate fund or if it's a private credit fund, what are the trends of that sector or that asset class? So a lot of that, this particular agent would continuously monitor and pull and present to you in a consistent fashion across all your investments, right? Um, so yeah, so I mean, I think I kind of went through a lot of those agents. There's a few others that were working behind the scenes. Those are more geared towards investment operations. So far, what I went through is more the investment research and due diligence part. There's a lot of other kind of aspects of the full investment life cycle. So let's say these agents would get you to a decision. But once you make a decision, since we're talking about private investments, these investments, stay with you for a long time, usually, right? Like if you're very lucky, you've probably got some exits in under 5 years, but a lot of them, are long-term investments. And so there's a lot of monitoring throughout the investment period. There is obviously, if you're an institutional LP invested in a fund, there's going to be, distribution, capital call notices, distribution letters as you're called to provide the funding. There could be, quarterly statements and updates from those fund managers. Similarly, quarterly updates, financial updates from startups or direct investments that you've made. So all of that, can also be fed in. And a lot of that we call as investment operations, like post investment. Once you've invested in something, you want to constantly kind of continue to monitor your investment and what's happening with that investment. So, there's a lot of those agents also that we're looking into and sort of building as we speak. But what I'd love to hear from this group is, if you are an active investor or a passive investor doing it, as a side job, or if you're part of an organization or an institution or an angel network, like I'd love to hear, like, where are you today, right? Are you of the three stages? Are you in that first stage of using a lot of, AI tools, but mostly as an assistant? You're feeding it information, getting information back, and then collating your information, or have you embedded it, a little bit more automation into your workflows? Your data is more cohesive across investments, and are you kind of looking to the future of going towards a fully automated investment platform? So, I'd love to hear from folks, where you stand, um, and if there's any interest. But I would, say use this, scorecard uh, to help you automate and become a sort of more efficient investor. If you are somewhere in score one or one and two, that's why I kind of created, like, okay, the next stage and what are the things you can automate, So hopefully this is a helpful chart. And if you're an investor who is looking to scale, who's doing, part-time but want to scale, like, this is the future. You really need the agentic infrastructure to automate a lot of the repeatable, mundane tasks and make you a more efficient investor, get to a no faster, and highlight the right investments for you in a more efficient manner. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I had.